Hey guys, welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be making some small modifications to the chassis so that we can set the seat exactly where we want it to be. So I'm in the middle of doing a couple different things here as far as setting up the chassis for the Baja. You can see I've got a temporary floor made there just so that when I hop inside I can get a pretty good feeling of how it's going to be when there's actually a floor on the chassis. And I'm figuring out where exactly I want this seat to be so that it's comfortable grabbing the steering wheel, the dashboard, the pedals, and able to do all that while you're like tightly harnessed into the seat. So everything has to be pretty reachable. And I'm running into a problem where this firewall that I built on the chassis is probably a little bit too far this way. So I think what I'm going to have to do is cut this stuff out. I mean, I'll cut out these crossbars, I'll cut out the seat belt bar, and then I'll take out the bracing for the firewall. And then I'll redraw that in the Bentech software, which will be simple enough to do. And I'll probably move this 2 or 3 inches back, which won't take up too much real estate for where the fuel cell and radiator is going to sit. I'm not worried about that. But it'll allow me some room to move the seat back if I want to, or tilt it back a little bit. Right now, it's a little bit too upright, and it's, I think, a little bit too close to all of this stuff. But let me run over to the other Baja and show you a couple of things that I want to make sure I get right on this chassis that I didn't on that one. So this chassis has a completely different style of seat. It's just a poly seat, and it takes up a lot less room because it doesn't have any foam or anything like that. So this seat is set really far back, and it's leaned back just to be really comfortable. But that's not going to work in the new chassis, because in this chassis, if you're actually fully harnessed in nice and tight, you can't grab the buttons on the dashboard, and you're really reaching out to reach the steering wheel. And on the new chassis, it's going to be set up so that you can actually be harnessed in fully, nice and tight, and still easily access everything. And then this chassis had a completely different pedal assembly setup. This one has the master cylinders inside the cab. The other chassis is going to have the master cylinders outside. And as you can see, when you're inside this Baja, the pedals are really low. You can see when I step on these, my foot is almost completely flat. And I shouldn't say I did that. That happened in this chassis because everything was so cramped down in here. And this works, but it would be nicer if you had a lot more room. It'd be a lot nicer. And because of that, when I designed the other chassis, I made everything bigger up here. The footwell is taller and it's wider on the new chassis. I also want to take a minute here to go over the new naming conventions. I've never actually had names for these two vehicles or these two chassis before. This one, the original one that I built, I'm calling this one from now on the Mauler. So if I'm talking about this Baja, I'll be calling it the Mauler. The new chassis back there, I'm going to call that Wratchet. I'll be calling it the Wratchet chassis, but I'll be referencing that as Wratchet. So that's going to be Wratchet. This is the Mauler. That's what I'll be calling these two guys from here on out. So the Mauler here has a really pretty comfortable setup except for the pedals, but it's not really intended for extreme duty use. And because the Wratchet here I'm setting up to be like a real intense Baja, I want to get this one so that I can be completely strapped into the seat, like harnessed in real tight, and easily access the steering wheel and the dashboard and the shifter, and then have the pedals have plenty of room to be using them. And you can already see all I've got here is I'm just in the middle of mocking up different pedal locations, moving them around, seeing what's most comfortable. But you can already see that I've added a couple inches between the pedals, and these pedals there's no master cylinders yet, so they're just free hanging, and when they do have master cylinders, they'll actually be pushed out to about here. But regardless, You can already see that I've got a lot more height on these pedals so that you can actually have your foot on the floor and just kind of pivot on your heel, and that's the way it should be, and that's the way that I want it. And there's a lot more room down here for flopping and banging around, so this should be a much nicer setup. So with all that information, knowing what I need to do here, I'm going to set up the time-lapse camera. I'm going to cut all this stuff out, which it's not really that big of a deal because this stuff was never solid welded. It's all just tacked or stitched in there. So I'll just go at it with a little Sawzall or my grinder and just knock a couple of these down, and then you can usually just hit it with a hammer and knock them out. So I'm going to take all of that out, and then I'm just going to set the chair up exactly where I want it to be, which is nice and comfortable and functional. And then I'll see how far back I need to move this to facilitate that. Alright, now I've got all the firewall and the roll bar supports cut out of there. That stuff came out of there nice and clean, so we're good to go. So now if we come back to the seat here we've got the seat mount that it sits on. This is the bracket that came with the seat. You can see that it's got multiple locations for going forward and backwards here, and I had set it up with the hole right in the middle. What I'm going to do for this round is I'm going to move the seat back one of these notches, which should be almost 1 inch further back. And then these brackets mount on the side of the seat here, and you can see they've got 3 locations in the front and they've got 3 locations in the rear. And the way that it was set up right now was leaned as far forward as possible. That's why I was saying it feels too upright. So what I'm going to do on this round is I'm just going to go to the center of each hole and kind of put the seat in there and see how that feels, and then if I need to I can still lean it further back, but you know, I want to go a little bit at a time. So hopefully in that last clip you could see that when I was sitting in there, everything was pretty comfortable. I got the seat moved back 1 notch and it's tipped back a little bit this way. Very comfortable. I think I'm going to leave it right there. I can reach the steering wheel, I can reach the pedals, and I believe when I get my shifter I'll be able to put that somewhere that's comfortable, and I can also reach or access the dashboard wherever I put the switches for that. One thing that I did do since I put the seat in there is I was a little bit nervous having that temporary pedal assembly hookup, that when I make this permanent the pedals might move, so I wanted to make a permanent bracket there for the pedals, which I did. I didn't film that because I thought initially that would be really easy, but it actually took over 2 days to get it right, because I actually had to make this plate several times before I got it right. But what you can see here is this is a pedal assembly from Willwood, and I actually cut it right through the middle. These two pieces used to be together, and because I wanted to separate the clutch pedal a little bit from the brake pedal, I had to separate that. So these are temporary. They make standalone pedal assemblies. I'll probably over time purchase those, so this won't be permanent. It'll work perfectly fine, and the placement of the pedals will be the same when I get their permanent assembly, so I'm not too worried about that. But that's why right now that looks like there's a chunk missing here, because I did actually cut right through there and pull the clutch pedal over. I believe everything should work just fine through here. I've got room for the spring on the shock there, and then there's room in between there so that when I come out of here with the brake lines, I'll just have a 90 and the lines will go straight over there. And I've got plenty of access to get to the master cylinders if I need to. So I'm real happy with how all that came out. The only thing that I wish I could change, and I might change this further on down the road, is I still wish the clutch pedal could be over like probably 1 to 2 inches. That would position it a little bit better for my left foot. It's completely accessible right now, but it could be better if it was over a little bit further. But clearance with the steering shaft wasn't a problem. You know, it runs through here, but it clears everything, and it doesn't impede with the brake pedal or anything like that. I just had to make sure that, you know, everything was in a very good position to give me the correct height, elevation this way, and that I wasn't over too far, that when the pedal swung it came in contact with the steering shaft. But everything clears there just fine, and it's not as congested as in the Mauler. So as you can see now with this setup, the chair being a little bit leaned back, it doesn't really feel like it's leaned back, but before it felt kind of like you were being pushed forward a little bit, and it was very uncomfortable. Now when I'm all strapped in here, it feels just like it should be. It feels good. The seat feels good. The pedals are at a great elevation. I mean, when I'm driving this and I'm hitting the brakes, I'm going to be able to just roll my heel right on the floor. So that's going to be awesome. There's a lot of room around here. Same deal with the clutch. It's pretty easy to reach now. Like I said, I wish it was, you know, a little bit further this way, and I might try to make some modifications to that further on down the road. But for now, this is perfectly good. Very comfortable. I've got plenty of room over here for the gas pedal when I get that hooked up. It's good elevation with the side over here, and when I am strapped in and I've got my switches will probably be either down here or I might mount them up here too. I'm not sure, but either way, if I'm strapped in here, I'll still be able to access switches here, and when I get a shifter down here, I'll be able to access all that with me without moving my back off the seat or anything. So I'm really stoked about that. It feels really good. This is probably how Captain Picard felt on the Starship Enterprise. I might have the wife start bringing me dinner out here, because this is more comfortable than some of the couches that we have inside. I will need to get the other seat going so that I can figure out how much room I have, because the two seats are going to be butted right up next to each other, and I need to see if I have enough room for the cutting brakes between the seats and where the shifter is going to go, because I think it's going to be a little bit difficult fitting the shifter and the cutting brakes in there, but I'll have to just put things in place and see how it pans out. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how I was laying things out so that everything fit properly. Not that it's horrible in the Mauler, but for Wratchet, I just wanted it to be a little bit more of an open space, not as cramped. And you know, I specifically designed the footwell of this chassis to be able to do that, so I wanted to make sure that I did. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope it's helping you guys with whatever you're working on, or possibly just motivating you to get out and work on something, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.